I was 31 when I realized my mother-in-law was trying to kill me. Not with a knife in the dark, not with a pillow over my face, not with anything so honest. Eleanor Whitfield preferred her murders slow, intimate, domestic, the kind that looked like love until you were too weak to stand, too tired to fight, too grateful for her care to question why you were dying. She started with the tea. It was 2021, 3 months after I married her son Daniel. We were living in Milwaukee, in a craftsman bungalow that Daniel had bought with his engineering salary, close enough to Eleanor's lake house for Sunday dinners, but far enough that I thought we had space. I was 28, a pastry chef at a bakery in the 3rd Ward, used to waking at 4 a.m. to proof dough and pipe buttercream. I was healthy. I was strong. I was the kind of woman who carried 50-pound bags of flour upstairs without breathing hard. Then the nausea started. Not dramatic, just a queasiness in the mornings, a heaviness after meals, a fatigue that settled into my bones like winter. I blamed the early hours, the stress of the wedding, the adjustment to married life. Daniel blamed my modern schedule, his mother's code for anything that didn't fit her 1950s template of wifeliness. Eleanor blamed my cooking. Rachel's generation doesn't understand real food, she told Daniel, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen where I was washing dishes. Pastry is sugar, sugar is poison, no wonder she's tired. She started bringing me remedies. Herbal teas in mason jars, labeled in her perfect script for energy, for digestion, for calming the nerves. Soups in Tupperware, thick with herbs I didn't recognize, that she pressed on me with maternal insistence. Drink it while it's hot, dear. My grandmother swore by this recipe. All the Whitfield women used it. I drank them. I was grateful. I was an orphan, my parents dead in a car accident when I was 19, and Eleanor's attention felt like the family I had lost, the mother I had never learned to replace. I ignored the metallic aftertaste, the slight numbness on my tongue, the way my hands trembled after the energy tea. I told myself it was adaptation, tradition, the price of belonging. By 2022, I was vomiting daily. My kidneys ached, my hair thinned. I developed a rash on my hands that made it impossible to work with dough, and I had to take leave from the bakery. The doctors were puzzled. Blood tests showed elevated creatinine, signs of renal stress, but no clear cause. Stress, they said, anxiety, new marriage adjustment. Some women have difficult transitions. Eleanor accompanied me to appointments. She sat in the waiting room with her knitting, spoke to the doctors in the hallway, brought me home with fresh batches of tea. For recovery, she said, for strength. For the baby you'll give us someday. There was no baby. There would never be a baby. The energy tea had seen to that, though I wouldn't understand until later. In March 2023, I collapsed in the kitchen of our bungalow. Daniel found me on the tile, unconscious, a cut on my forehead from the counter I'd hit on the way down. The emergency room diagnosed acute kidney injury, cause undetermined. They mentioned toxins, poisons, environmental exposure. They asked if I worked with chemicals, if I took supplements, if I had access to anything unusual. I mentioned Eleanor's teas. The doctors nodded, made notes, did nothing. Eleanor was a respected community member, a retired nurse, a philanthropist. Her teas were traditional remedies, family recipes, harmless folk medicine. The idea that she might be poisoning me was absurd, paranoid, the kind of accusation that would destroy my marriage, my reputation, my last chance at family. I dropped it. I went home. I drank more tea. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Rachel, and this is the story of how I learned that the woman who called me daughter was measuring my death in teaspoons. If you've ever had someone hurt you while calling it care, if you've ever been too grateful for family to see the poison in the cup, subscribe. This one's for you. Here's my story. The collapse changed something in me. Not immediately. I was too weak, too dependent, too grateful for Eleanor's continued attention. She visited daily now, bringing meals, helping with laundry, sitting with me through the long afternoons when I was too tired to read or watch television. She was solicitous, attentive. The mother I had lost made flesh in her precise movements, and her constant offers of just a little more soup, dear. You need your strength, but I started noticing things. The way she watched me drink the tea. Not with concern but with assessment, the way a baker watches a soufflé rise, measuring, calculating, waiting for the moment of collapse or perfection. The way she handled the mason jars, always turning the labels away from me, always preparing the drinks herself, never letting me see the herbs she added. The way she spoke to Daniel about me, Rachel's delicate, Rachel's sensitive, Rachel's modern lifestyle isn't suited to our family, with a tone of pity that masked something harder, hungrier. And the garden. I saw it for the first time in May 2023, when Daniel drove me to the lake house for Mother's Day. I was still weak, still unable to work, still drinking Eleanor's teas because they were the only thing that made her smile, the only proof I had that I was still her daughter-in-law, still part of the family she had reluctantly adopted. The garden was behind the house, hidden from the road by a hedge of lilacs. It was beautiful, meticulously maintained, rows of herbs and flowers in raised beds. Eleanor walked me through it, her hand on my elbow, pointing out plants with the pride of a collector. Time for courage, she said, rosemary for memory, lavender for calm. She paused at a bed of tall purple flowers, their hooded blooms hanging like bells. Monkshood, she said, aconite, very old, very powerful. My grandmother used it for heart conditions in tiny amounts. The difference between medicine and poison is just the dose, you know. I didn't know. I smiled, nodded, felt the sun on my face and the weakness in my legs and the strange certainty that I was looking at something important, something I didn't yet understand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Daniel's childhood bedroom, preserved as a shrine to his boyhood, baseball trophies and science fair ribbons and a poster of the periodic table, and I searched my phone for monkshood, aconite, aconitum. The results were clear. Aconite was one of the most toxic plants in the world. In small doses, it caused nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, irregular heartbeat, all my symptoms, everyone. In larger doses, it caused paralysis, cardiac arrest, death. It was difficult to detect in the body, metabolized quickly, leaving only the damage behind. I read until dawn. I read about mithridatism, the practice of taking small doses of poison to build immunity or to slowly kill someone while appearing to care for them. I read about historical poisoners, about women who used herbs and teas and remedies to eliminate rivals, inconvenient relatives, daughters-in-law who didn't fit. And I read about Eleanor's first daughter-in-law, Daniel's ex-wife Melissa, who had left him after 3 years of mysterious illness, who had moved to Oregon and never spoken to the Whitfields again, who had told a friend. I found the blog post, buried in archives, that she thought Eleanor was trying to make her sick but could never prove it. I sat in the dark, my phone glowing, my heart racing in a way that might have been the aconite or might have been understanding. And I made a decision. Not to confront Eleanor, I was too weak, too isolated, too aware that no one would believe me. Not to tell Daniel he would choose his mother, he always chose his mother, the umbilical cord between them was made of steel and decades of manipulation. I decided to survive, and then I decided to understand. Recovery was slow. I stopped drinking Eleanor's teas, gradually, carefully, making excuses about new medications, doctor's orders, interactions with my treatment. I poured them out when she wasn't looking, hid the mason jars in the back of cabinets, pretended to sip while letting the liquid cool and congeal. I ate only food I prepared myself or that came in sealed packages. I drank bottled water, not trusting even the tap in our house. Eleanor noticed. Of course she noticed. Her eyes narrowed when I declined her soup, when I pushed away her tea, when I made my own coffee with beans I bought myself. But she couldn't force me without revealing herself, and she was too careful for that. She simply increased her other attentions, the critical comments, the helpful suggestions about my weight, my hair, my inability to keep house the way a Whitfield wife should. You look better, she said, and her voice was flat, assessing, disappointed. The doctors must have found the right treatment. They did, I lied. A new medication, for stress. I'm feeling much stronger. Good, she said, and she smiled. And I saw the calculation in her eyes, the adjustment of dose, the recalibration of strategy, the patience of a woman who had been playing a long game and was willing to wait. Because the family reunion is coming. 60th anniversary for Harold and me. I want you to help me cook. The reunion. 60 years of marriage, 40 years of poison, a dynasty built on herbs and manipulation and daughters-in-law who learned to disappear or die. I smiled back, the same smile I used for customers at the bakery, for difficult colleagues, for anyone I needed to convince that I was harmless. I'd love to help, I said, and I began to plan. The investigation took 3 years. Not because I lacked evidence, but because I lacked standing. I was a sick woman with a history of stress, married to a man who loved his mother more than his wife, living in a community where Eleanor was revered. I needed proof that would survive scrutiny, allies who would testify, a story that could not be dismissed as paranoia or resentment. I found Melissa first. She was living in Portland, working as a librarian, healthy and cautious and surprised to hear from me. We met in a coffee shop, and she looked at me with the recognition of survivors. The same dark circles under the eyes, the same careful relationship with food, the same wariness of anything offered with a maternal smile. She started with tea, Melissa said, her hands wrapped around her cup like armor. Herbal blends, family recipes. I thought she was being kind. I thought I was an orphan too, you know, my mother died when I was young. I wanted a mother so badly. Did you ever test the tea? I asked. I tried. I sent samples to a lab privately. But aconite metabolizes so quickly, by the time I got results it was just herbs, trace amounts, nothing conclusive. And Daniel, she paused, her face tightening. Daniel thought I was imagining things. His mother was a nurse, a saint, a woman who volunteered at hospice. The idea that she would hurt anyone was absurd. She left you alone when you left him, I said. No more tea, no more soup, and you got better. I got better, Melissa agreed, but I lost Daniel. I lost the family I thought I was building. And I never told anyone, not really, because who would believe me? Eleanor Whitfield, poisoner. It sounded like a bad novel. I showed her my documentation, the medical records, the symptom journals, the photographs of Eleanor's garden with the monkshood in full bloom. Melissa added her own, the lab reports, the failed tests, the journal she had kept during her marriage, documenting every illness, every remedy, every moment of doubt. Together, we found others. A cousin's wife who had allergies that cleared up when she stopped attending family dinners. A neighbor who had accepted Eleanor's cold remedies and spent a week in the hospital with unexplained cardiac symptoms. A hospice patient Eleanor had cared for whose family had wondered, quietly, about the speed of her decline. None of it was conclusive. Eleanor was careful, precise, a woman who understood that the best poisons were the ones that looked like care. But the pattern was clear, a constellation of illness surrounding a woman who profited from her reputation as a healer, who collected gratitude from the sick and mourning, who eliminated anyone who threatened her control. And then I found the recipes. They were in a box in Daniel's attic, Eleanor's handwriting, his grandmother's before her, going back 4 generations. Most were harmless, traditional, the kind of folk medicine that filled community cookbooks. But some had notes in the margins, in a different ink, a different hand. For difficult daughters-in-law. For those who forget their place. For the ones who think they can replace us. The ingredients were listed in code: special pepper, grandmother's thyme, blue flower essence. But the symptoms they described matched aconite poisoning exactly. And the final instruction, repeated in every damaging recipe: serve with love, watch them fade. I photographed everything. I made copies. I stored them in safety deposit boxes and cloud servers and the homes of friends who didn't know what they were keeping. And I waited. The 60th anniversary reunion was scheduled for June 2026. Eleanor planned it as her masterpiece, a weekend at the lake house, 50 guests, a dinner she would cook herself, the matriarch demonstrating her enduring power. She had been cooking for weeks, testing recipes, preparing ingredients, the same meticulous attention she applied to everything. I offered to help. She accepted, reluctantly. I was still recovering, not strong enough for real work, but useful for chopping vegetables if you can manage without cutting yourself. I managed. I chopped onions without tears, carrots without comment, herbs with the careful precision of a woman who had spent 3 years learning to identify poison by sight and smell. I watched Eleanor prepare her famous stew, the recipe that had won county fairs, that had fed governors and senators, that no one else was allowed to make. She used her special ingredients openly, confidently, the jars labeled in her perfect script. Grandmother's thyme in the broth, blue flower essence in the seasoning. The guests would eat, they would praise, they would never know that the difference between this batch and the damaging ones was only in the dose, or in the specific jar Eleanor chose. I had replaced them the night before. It was simple, almost elegant. Eleanor kept her special herbs in a locked cabinet, but the lock was old, the key hidden in a kitchen drawer she thought I didn't know about. I didn't add anything to her jars. That would be poisoning, that would make me her. I simply replaced her special thyme with ordinary thyme, her blue flower essence with food coloring and water. And in the jar she used for her own seasoning, the private blend she added to her own plate to test, I placed a trace amount of aconite. The same trace amount she had used on me. Enough to cause nausea and weakness, not enough to kill. She didn't notice. She was too confident, too practiced, too certain of her own control. She cooked, she seasoned, she served. The guests ate, they praised, they asked for the recipe that she smiled and declined to share. And then an hour after dinner, Eleanor turned pale. She excused herself, hurried to the bathroom, didn't return. The guests murmured, "Too much wine, the heat, she's not as young as she used to be." I waited. Patient, invisible, the same patience I had learned in 3 years of recovery. When the paramedics arrived, I found the jar. The special thyme, the blue flower essence, the handwritten labels that matched the coded recipes in her attic. I showed them to the doctor, my hands shaking, my voice breathless with practiced concern. "She's been using these for years. Family recipes." I never thought, she's a nurse, she knows about herbs, the lab found aconite. Not enough to kill, but enough to explain the symptoms. Enough to raise questions. Enough to start an investigation. And then I told my story. Not dramatically, not vengefully, but with the documentation of 3 years. The medical records, the symptom journals, the photographs, the coded recipes, the testimony of Melissa and the others. I told it to the police, to the district attorney, to the journalists who had covered Eleanor's philanthropy and were now hungry for scandal. Daniel collapsed. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually, the way a man collapses when he learns that his mother is not the saint he believed, that his wife is not the hysteric he dismissed, that his entire life has been built on poison and performance. He asked me once why I hadn't told him sooner. I asked him gently if he would have believed me. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Eleanor was arrested for attempted murder. The trial was brief, the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern clear, the witnesses numerous. She was sentenced to 15 years, a light sentence for a heavy crime, but enough. Enough for her to die in prison as she had tried to make me die in her care. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was in Portland opening a bakery with Melissa, clean ingredients, we called it, every component traced, labeled, transparent. No secrets, no special recipes. No poison disguised as love. I am Rachel Whitfield, though I am considering changing my name. I am 34 years old. I was poisoned by my mother-in-law for 3 years, and I survived by becoming the kind of woman who could plan her own rescue with the patience of a baker waiting for dough to rise. I did not kill Eleanor. I let her taste her own medicine in the smallest possible dose, and I let the system do what it was designed to do. I am not proud. I am not ashamed. I am simply here, in a kitchen that smells of vanilla and butter and nothing hidden, making pastries that anyone can eat without fear. See you in the next story.